Welcome to the Empowered Birth series, where I go deep into everything that you need to know to plan a true, empowered, natural birth. And today we're going deep into the three things that you need to know before you choose your care provider. If you've seen my other video on the 26 things that you need to know if this is your first time planning a true natural birth, or you just got the guide off of my website at empoweringmomsbirth.com/freebies, then you know that number one on my list is choose your care provider carefully. In fact, I talk about this inside my book, Your Empowered Birth, which you can get on Amazon. There's also a playlist inside of my YouTube channel, so you can go and listen to the book if you don't feel like buying it. Although, sometimes it's nice to have a physical copy. Even if it's something on Kindle where you can highlight and get just one or two passages. And Your Empowered Birth is packed with information to help you plan and get your true natural birth. But before I get into the three things that you need to know when it comes to choosing your care provider, I'm just going to let you know that a lot of the mainstream information out there is going to derail your true natural birth. This is because our birth culture and our medical system has been based on profit, convenience, liability, and also fear of natural birth. In fact, a lot of things that are supposed to be natural are what I call the preservative-laden frozen dessert version of natural birth. If you want to know more about that, you can go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, where I tell you the difference between true natural birth and natural birth perpetuated by our birth culture and medical system. But basically, it comes down to this. True natural birth is your physiological process that your body is going to do anyway. Is the process that you are actually looking for when you're planning a natural birth. Because you want to avoid the induction. You want to avoid the C-section. You'd like to avoid all of those medical interventions that cause horror stories in the mom groups. Maybe you even fell into that trap the last time. If you did, I'm just going to say I'm sorry, and you're not alone. In fact, a lot of moms, they don't recognize that what they fell into last time was a trap, and it led to more pain, more unnecessary intervention, even C-sections and birth trauma. So, just so you know, natural birth traps, they're really hard to spot unless you know how. And in this video, I'm going to tell you about the three things that you really need to be looking for when it comes to choosing your care provider. Because, as I said in number one of the 26 things that you need to know if this is your first time planning a true natural birth, again, go watch that video if you want the whole list, or just go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/freebies, and just get the overview. Choosing your care provider matters. And if you choose the wrong one, they're going to lead you down a medicalized path that is going to then cause you to doubt yourself or give into that induction, give into that C-section. It can sabotage your birth experience, especially if you have a category 5 care provider and you don't know it. Stay to the end of this video and I'll tell you what that is. Okay, so you know that it's important to have the right care provider, but a lot of the questions out there that you ask during the interviews are going to just put you down that same rabbit hole where you end up bait and switched by the end. If you don't know what bait and switch is, let me just quickly tell you, this is what happens when typically you go your whole pregnancy and you think that you've got everything handled and that your care provider is awesome. They're going to support natural birth. But then at 35 weeks, you bring in your birth plan to finalize everything. And suddenly they're looking at your plan and they're going, no, we don't do that. No, you might be able to have that. It's policy that we prefer this. And then they undermine your confidence. They even do sneaky things like membrane sweeps, or they break your waters during the membrane sweep, or they are pushing cervical checks, and they're wearing down your resolve to have a natural birth with the insidious plan of getting you to follow their path. That's the category 5 care provider that I mentioned. So basically, what happens is like you've got two camps. You've got the care providers who wish that they could support natural birth, but for whatever reason, they're not. And then you have the camp of the one that really just got into it for the money. And if they had their way, they would give every single one of their clients a C-section. And in fact, the only ones that don't get a C-section are the clients that ended up going too fast in labor to get one. And yes, those people do exist. And there's about, I think, 1/3 of them out there currently. Just don't quote me on that though, because like this is an overview of what I've been seeing in the mom groups and what I've been seeing out in mainstream. And also from what I understand about the psychology of a category 5 care provider, which again, I'll tell you more about near the end. So, you obviously don't want that person, right? You want to have your true natural birth. You want to be able to go through your pregnancy feeling confident, and you want to be able to have your choices honored, correct? Well, this is where you have to understand our birth culture because for a very long time, there was no such thing as informed consent. In fact, that only became a thing in birth in the 1990s. Before that, there was informed consent introduced in the 1970s. And the reason this happened was because there were a lot of psychological experiments that started to go really, really bad. One of them was the prison experiment. There was another one where they would pretend to be electrocuting somebody in another room, and it caused a lot of psychological trauma for the people that were in the study. So by that point, the mental health industry was like, okay, we have to do something about this. We have to do informed consent so that anybody who goes into these studies or does a medical procedure knows what they're getting into and can assess the risks and benefits. However, maternity care was overlooked for this because there was still the pervasive attitude that anything that gets the baby out healthy and gets a live mother can be done, and there was no informed consent. You also have to look at the historical context of where women didn't even have the right to vote, where women weren't even able to have bank accounts under their own name, and where marital rape wasn't even a thing until about the 1990s when suddenly it's like, no, the husband cannot actually have access to his wife in that way just because he wants it. She needs to consent. So when you understand the context of what you're really working with, and you understand that there was no informed consent until the 1990s, and there was no such thing as evidence-based, and that a lot of practices in maternity care were done just as routine until they could be proved to be harmful or there was something better out there in the medical community that worked more efficiently, but they didn't count in the trauma that happened in this. You can then kind of see where we're running into trouble with true natural birth. And if you want to know more about that, then I highly recommend that you check out Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage by Rachel Reed. This book goes deep into the historical context of birth, goes into the medical practices of the time, and helps you unravel the threads of our society so you can see, oh, that's where that practice came from. Oh, maybe I might want to question that a little further. There's also a really good section on just physiological birth itself, which is the true natural birth through Eve's story, which I just love this. When Jenny and I were diving deep into this a few years back in our classes, we were just absolutely fascinated because it also shows you what you really need to know about physiological birth versus what the medical system has taught you. And then you can kind of see why care providers are so hesitant to actually support true natural birth. But you want a true natural birth. So the key is you need to find a care provider that's aligned with that. And they might be resistant and they might come in a form that you didn't expect. In fact, just trying to find a midwife will not help you. Check number 2 on my list of 26 things that you need to know if this is your first time planning a true natural birth, to know that not all midwives are created equal, or just watch the deep dive training on that. So the thing you need to really understand is that it doesn't matter if you're hiring a midwife or a doctor. What really matters is number one, are they truly aligned with supporting a true natural birth? Because there's two camps that your care provider can fall into. They can either be mostly hands off or they can be highly medically controlled or somewhere in between, but still with the mindset that birth is more of a disaster waiting to happen rather than a physiological process. Or birth is a physiological process that sometimes needs medical intervention. Now, this does not completely eliminate bias because as medical professionals, they have mostly been practicing in a hospital environment. If you want to know how that really plays out, all you have to think about is cats giving birth. If we took cats who typically go and hide under the bed or go into a closet or go and hide in a shoebox under the bed, like, I mean, cats will fit in anything, but you understand, like, they will go and hide and they're birthing their babies and they're fine. But what happens if you took these same mammals and put them under bright lights and had people disturbing them the whole time, trying to assess their progress? We would end up coming to the conclusion that cats don't give birth very well. And I mean, you can replace this with any other mammal. All other mammals need darkness, they need quiet, they need safety, and they need to feel that safety in their bodies to be able to birth effectively. Otherwise, the labor process shuts down. And now you can kind of see why doing the medicalized version of birth is causing a lot of problems. However, that's their training. They're also not seeing a lot of physiological births because they're attending hospital births with the hospital environment, and the people that are going into the hospital typically just follow these protocols without question. You're also looking at the fact that they're mostly trained in managing birth, not sitting back and just letting birth unfold. But Dr. Michel Audant said it himself, do not disturb the birthing woman. And he said that midwives, the best ones, are knitting in the corner. Now, you could substitute this for anything, but the idea is that the midwife's hands are busy. She's not doing something to the mother. She's sitting there and she's just minding her own business. So, I mean, she could be reading, she could be just checking things on her Instagram, whatever it is, she's not disturbing. So, one of the things that I tell all of my clients when they're planning a true natural birth is they need to find a care provider that is willing to be hands off. Even if they aren't typically hands off, even though they're used to their clients asking for more support, when you're looking for your care provider, you need to be very clear that you could do this birth yourself and you're only asking them to come in as like backup or as a little bit of support if you need it. But otherwise, you're very, very clear on the fact that you don't really need them. You know that your baby is going to come with them there or not, but you're inviting them into a piece of your birth. You're inviting them into your space, and they need to be honored by the fact that you're choosing them to be in that sacred space, not to control that, but to actually be part of it. And to recognize that even if they don't make it to the birth, that you did it yourself. Some of the best midwives that I've talked to over the years are the ones who say, my client did it themselves. And my own midwife from my home birth even said the same things. Like after I had my daughter, she's like, you did it yourself. And I mean, I technically did because my midwife didn't come in until I was pretty much almost done pushing. Like my daughter was, her head was halfway out. And then she just pulled her out of the water and put her on my chest. They did a few assessments after the birth, but I did it myself. You need to have the care provider who is willing to recognize that birth is a physiological process, pregnancy is a physiological process, and they're willing to take their hands off and make suggestions. However, they can't have any attachment to that. And if you want to know more about what that looks like or how to get your care provider on board, how to see if they're open to that, then I highly suggest you check out my book, How to Hire Your Care Provider. It's a little ebook. It comes with the Empowered Birth Workshop and your Empowered Birth Academy. So you can go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/academy. You can get everything. If, however, that's a lot for you right now, you can also just email me hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com and just let me know that you'd like access to that ebook, but I only give it to action takers. So if it's not currently inside my Empowered Birth Toolkit, that is a way for you to get access to it. It's a short little ebook. It tells you a little bit more about the history of birth and the historical context of where your care provider is coming from, the 4 big mistakes that you're making when trying to hire your care provider, gives you a little bit more on the red flags. And it also tells you the overall process that I teach all of my clients when it comes to hiring their care provider so that they know that whoever they've hired is not going to bait and switch them later. So again, you can just email me hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, or if you'd like the deeper dive training, the course, then go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/academy and you'll get everything that I've ever created and then some. Okay, so now that you understand that your care provider needs to have the proper philosophy, the next part of this is that they also need to see you as the decision maker. They need to recognize that you are the one in charge, and they need to be open to learning a new way, even if they've never practiced that way before. So Jenny did this with her second baby, where she had already looked at what she wanted out of her care provider. She'd gone through the empowered birth method. Actually, a lot of the questions that are inside your empowered birth for how to hire your care provider and choosing the right facilitators for your birth came from what I taught Jenny. And so she was very clear on what she wanted in her birth. She wanted a hands-off birth. She did have some issues with her medical history where she had chronic high blood pressure. She was concerned about possibly getting gestational diabetes. She had had postpartum preeclampsia with her first baby. She wanted to keep an eye on that so that didn't happen again. So she kind of knew that she would need to have some medical support. But she was first looking at midwives. We couldn't find any in the area willing to take her on. However, she went and applied at a different practice. And this one was more like a family doctor slash obstetric practice. And she had been recommended to this practice by one of our doulas in the area. She said, hey, you should go check out this person. They're really good. They support physiological birth. So she went and applied. And then their colleague actually saw her birth plan, reached out to her and said, can I be your doctor? I would like to support you. And he did. He was really excited to be able to see this birth unfold. And even though it was technically high risk, his hands were basically off of it. So he let Jenny do whatever she wanted to do. He respected her choices. And even if it went against a little bit of the policies, and even if it was not something typical that would happen with a high risk client, he was at least open to trying a new way. And he was also expressing some of his concerns, which Jenny understood his fears. This is why the birth advocacy report inside my Empowered Birth Toolkit is so helpful, because once you know your care provider's fears and concerns, you can then find information to help them with that, and you can show them your backup plan. So Jenny had her idealized birth plan of what she wanted. She also had her backup plan. She had figured out all of her things that she was concerned with. And then anything else that the doctor was maybe concerned with that wasn't true for her, she was like, well, if that happens, I already have something in place for that. And I'm not really concerned about it. So in the end, she was able to get this true natural birth, even with a doctor. So the key is not just what kind of care provider you have, but also their qualities. Are they open to learning a new way? Do they have an open mind? If they have a very closed mindset and they believe that they are in charge and that you don't know what you're talking about and that it's their job to persuade you to see reason, you might have a category number 5. Make sure you check out my list of the 17 red flags that you want to watch out for in a care provider. It's on my website at empoweringmomsbirth.com/freebies. And that will give you the list of the things that typically I see, especially in the mom groups, where I know that there just might be a category number 5 care provider in the mix that they need to get away from. And if you want a deeper dive, make sure you also get the Empowered Birth Toolkit because this comes with a birth advocacy report. This report goes into the 4 different types of fear that your care provider may be dealing with that causes them to resist your birth plan and try to push you into what's typical. And it also tells you how to deal with the category 5 care provider who is overly controlling, thinks it's their way or the highway, has absolutely no empathy, doesn't care about your birth plans, and would rather you just toe the line. And if you don't, they're going to threaten you. That's what a category 5 is. So again, you just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/toolkit and you'll get that resource automatically. There's other things that go into this toolkit as well, but I put things in and I take things out. And this is an ever evolving resource. It's basically a Google Drive file that you get access to when you join the newsletter. So, the Empowered Birth newsletter, I give you deeper dive tips every single week. I tell you about what's going on in the Empowered Birth Circle, which is my network of birth workers and other people that kind of tie into the empowered mom philosophy. And then you can also figure out what else is out there. Because I believe that wisdom comes from multiple perspectives. I also believe that information needs to be more accessible. And when a lot of the mainstream stuff, people keep sharing the same resources over and over, the ones that I know are not going to help, whereas the really good stuff is typically hidden and I am able to find it. And when I find gold, I want to share it. So you might not find these resources any other place because people aren't telling others about it. It's not something that is mainstream. So it's like a best kept secret. It's like if you were in a small town and you just arrived and you have absolutely no idea where anything is. And some of the best restaurants are actually hidden downstairs and they look like little holes in the wall and you don't really know what's in there. And because it kind of looks on the outside like just nothing, you walk right past it. Meanwhile, you're going to the one that everybody else on the tourist line is going to, and it's crap. It's not what you wanted. So, when you want to do something in a new town, obviously you want to talk to the locals who really know and are friendly. So think of me as your friendly neighborhood doula and coach who knows all of the good people to get into connection with and knows where all the secrets are and knows all the loopholes in the medical system and can guide you to your true natural birth, your empowered birth. And you might be wondering, why the heck would I give all of this away for free? What's the catch? Well, the catch is that if you're going to take the free path, then all I ask is that you pay it forward, like, share, and subscribe to this channel, share the videos, tell others about this because I'm committed to you having an empowered birth. I'm also committed to every mom having an empowered birth. And that's why I have 3 paths for working with me. Number 1 is the do-it-yourself path, where you can just take every single video, resource, guide, and just all of my content, and you can piece this together yourself. That is the path where you can also get the Empowered Birth Toolkit, which I put resources in and I take them out and I just keep interchanging them. The only one that stays in the toolkit the whole time is the birth advocacy report, because this is the most valuable resource when it comes to getting your care provider on your side. And there's no way I would ever dream of taking that out. So you get that report. You also get access to all these other resources. You just keep going into the drive, you keep following the newsletter, and you know when new things are coming in. And this is basically how you are going to be able to get the empowered birth method. The second path is self-study. So maybe you're someone who prefers to have things laid out a lot easier. Maybe you don't mind paying a little bit of money to get a course or a book. Maybe you would rather have a little bit more support from email or maybe just a quick message back and forth. I also have laser coaching available, which is about 15 minutes where I get deep into whatever issue you're having. I usually do about 1 or 2 sessions per course. So if you do get your Empowered Birth Academy, this is how you get everything. It's almost as good as me coaching you directly, but without the hefty price tag. You get all of the recorded content, you get all of the little PDF guides, you get all of the ebooks, everything that I create. It's like a bigger database of all the information that I create. And the only thing that's not available with the self-study is more one-to-one support or even the live classes. So that is something separate. So again, you can go and get the self-study and you get everything. And the reason again for that is because I don't work with everyone. I really protect my energy and my time, especially since I have so many other projects that I'm working on and I have my kids to take care of. I'm really committed to my family. I'm committed to my friends. I'm committed to just my own energy, and self-care is incredibly important. When I was a coach in the beginning, I would do a lot of really long one-to-one calls and sessions. I'd be running classes, and I was very much in danger of burning myself out, which unfortunately is why your care provider often doesn't get to tell you all of the things that you need to know because they don't have time either. They can burn themselves out, especially if they're supporting true natural birth. So you need to be mindful of what your care provider is really dealing with. And the empowered birth method really helps you to pinpoint the deep concern that you really have so that when you go into those appointments with your care provider, you're like, here's the thing that I'd like to discuss with you. And you don't have a million different questions. They aren't confused. You aren't confused. And you can both get on the same page. And I do have more tips on birth advocacy within your Empowered Birth Academy. You can also check out my book, Your Empowered Birth. Like it's just everywhere. I put this stuff out there because when I was a first-time mom, I didn't know how to navigate that medical system. When I was a second-time mom, I kind of figured it out, and I was using my appointments mostly to talk shop with my midwives because of what I'd learned. And I was also getting the inside information about what they were dealing with their other clients. I mean, they weren't naming names or anything, but they were basically telling me the struggles that they had, the limitations that they had, and what this was ultimately doing and causing them to burn out. The truly good midwives typically had about 3 to 7 years before they would burn out and not be able to practice anymore. The same with doulas, it was like 3 to 7 years. It was like clockwork. And the ones that stayed longer typically ended up practicing in a more of a systematic way that then led to more trauma of their clients. And they would just they they couldn't handle it anymore at a certain point and they'd just be like, you know what? I have to retire. And my midwife with my first baby, she'd even said, I'm retiring in 2 years. So I won't be around when you have your second. And I'm going to tell you right now that a lot of the practices, like the way people are doing birth, if you really want to have a true natural birth, you need to find a different midwife practice and it needs to be more holistic. And do not go with the first one you see. Like, just really be careful because most people are relying on machines, they're not relying on their hands. I mean, she was a midwife and she'd been in that game probably since the 70s. So she really understood what was going on and she was just she just told me everything. And I have other midwives that have been practicing since like the 80s and the 70s and they've told me similar stories about how things used to be back in the day versus how they are now, which leads to number 3. You need to also recognize where your care provider has privileges in which hospitals and what organizations they happen to be under. Because even if your care provider happens to be of the more natural minded and is willing to let you lead and take their hands off things, you still have to be aware of their limitations. There may be insurance issues that come up because they have to carry insurance, and the insurance companies may have restrictions on how they're allowed to practice, which then, if you're declining a test or an intervention or a routine procedure, then the insurance companies are like, well, wait a minute, we're going to up your premiums. Or maybe it's that they happen to be practicing in a hospital that is very medical minded, in which case, if you are having a home birth, this isn't a problem because they can't really see what's going on. Except that if you call them too early in labor, which is what happened to me, they then have to call the hospital and say that a home birth is taking place, which then still puts you on the clock. So, what happened with me is that I called my midwife to the house. She assessed my progress. I was at almost 6 centimeters, and she had called the hospital to tell them. And because of the fact that she was under this organization, this governing body of how she's allowed to practice, and she'd been newly certified, it had only been 3 years, she then had to keep reporting the progress, except I wasn't progressing. And because I wasn't progressing 1 centimeter per hour as I was supposed to, there came a point where she needed to ask me again to consent to another cervix check to see where I was at. Now, I didn't want this. However, I could also kind of sense like she needed to know. And against my better judgment, I allowed this. It was incredibly painful. It was traumatic. It was probably the worst part of my labor. And what happened is that my labor ended up stalling out. And she said, okay, now labor has completely stopped. And we have two choices here. I can call the hospital and say that this was a false start and go home, or we can keep going like we are, and I'll have to assess you again in 4 hours. And if you're not any further along, then I'm going to have to transfer you. We'll have to consult with an OB. They'll probably tell me that you need to transfer. They're going to want to break your waters and get things moving because you've been in labor for over 24 hours now. And like things need to be moving because you're a second time mom. Maybe there's a problem. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, there's no effing way that that is happening. Like that was my thoughts in my head. It's like there's no effing way that that is happening. Like I would sooner do this myself. And she said, if you choose option one and I go home and then you go back into labor and you call me, I'll have to come back and reassess you. And this is when I realized that I couldn't call her back until I was pushing because of the limitations that she had. So you need to be mindful of the fact that even if your care provider truly does believe in true natural birth, even if they are willing to take their hands off of it and trust your judgment, they are also dealing with their own level of restrictions. And again, if you want to know more about that, you can check out Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. There was actually a quote in that book, a little anecdotal story, where a midwife was saying, well, we could have a mom in labor and her waters could be completely intact. And then, like, she's doing fine, but the OB comes in and they're like, why aren't the waters released yet? And then what do you do in that situation? Because now you've got somebody higher up on the hierarchy and they're kind of putting pressure on you to conform to what is believed to be proper, and like mom doesn't want it. So there's a very coercive environment. So not only do you need to know what the restrictions and limitations are of your care provider if you're having a home birth, but if you're having a hospital birth, this is a whole other can of worms that you need to figure out. Does that hospital support physiological birth? Because this is another thing that I recognized is that my midwife for my first pregnancy, she was fully on board. Like she believed in true natural birth. She had seen it for decades, and she'd also come into the practices before midwifery had been registered under our medical system. So she understood that birth could happen without intervention. But then she had also seen all of these restrictions. And because of the fact that I'd been told I couldn't have a home birth, I went into the hospital. And I wasn't aware of the hospital policies around natural birth and how long a mom is allowed to be pushing for. And I didn't also see until later just how much my midwife had had to fight that system to keep the OBs out of my room, to keep the hospital from pulling rank on her. And the only reason she was able to stand up as strong as she could probably was because of the fact that she was 2 years away from retirement. And if they slapped her on the wrist or whatever, it didn't matter. Whereas there was a lot of younger midwives out there, newly certified even, that would not risk their job just to allow a mom to have more autonomy in her birth. So when you're in a toxic hospital environment, you have to be aware of something called horizontal violence in that system. And that is what your care provider is dealing with. So you need to recognize, well, what hospital privileges do they have at what places, and what is that environment, and how is that going to affect their practice? Which ties again into that story I told you from Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage with that midwife who then had the OB come in and ask why the waters hadn't been broken. Like, why haven't you broken her waters yet? Like, that's something that needs to happen because she's still in labor. Like this, let's speed this up. Like, get in the bed, get out of the bed, send her home. Never mind about physiological birth, because again, birth is a business in the hospital. So for more on that, though, you might want to also check out Speaking of the Village podcast with Don Thompson and Nicole Harlett. In one of the episodes, I think it was even the first one, Don Thompson actually said that the way that the medical model of birth is, it's not sustainable to have a true natural birth. There's no money in that. It's not a sustainable model. So, of course, the system is going to try to control it as much as possible. The system isn't broken. The system works exactly how it was designed to work for a business model, but it doesn't work as a physiological natural birth model for you. So it's not working for you, it's working for them. So again, to recap, the three things you need to know when it comes to choosing your care provider, hiring one, is that you need to first look at their overall philosophy and how they view birth. Do they view it as a physiological event where if they miss the birth, they know that you could do it with or without them? Or do they view it as something that they need to attend and control and manage? Because if you want a true natural birth, you need somebody who is at least willing to recognize that their role is as a supporter and facilitator of the physiological process, not controlling it, that it will happen with or without them, that you could birth your baby in your car, that you could accidentally birth your baby at home or intentionally birth your baby at home, that even if you call them at the last possible minute, you've got this. Even if they don't get there until after the birth has already taken place, it's not a dire emergency. They need to have confidence in your body. Number two, they also need to be willing to let go of any of their fears or limitations and try a new way. So even if they've been practicing a certain way and it's been what other people have been asking for, they need to see you as unique and your birth experience as unique. They need to look at your birth plan and they need to be like, okay, I'm going to follow your lead. Here's something I'm concerned about. And they're taking the back seat, though, as you are telling them, I'm confident with this and I want to move forward, or I didn't consider that. Let me just take a step back and think about if this is true for me. Okay. It might be true in this case. Okay, so now I've got another backup plan. So if that thing happens, this is what we'll do. And do you have any input on that? And then it becomes a collaboration, not shared decision making, but an actual collaboration where you are the one leading and they are the one following your lead and bringing their expertise and their tools to it. So it's almost like if you were renovating a house and you have this vision for how you want your place to look, and you've hired a contractor. Now, the contractor has seen where things can fall apart, but you don't want the contractor to suddenly say to you, yeah, you honestly can't design that house at all, and I'm going to just do my thing, and you're just going to like it. Like that just wouldn't work. Instead, you want to be like, "Oh, can you tell me more about that? Why wouldn't that work? Okay, would that be in all cases? Okay, well, I'd really like it to be done this way. So how can you learn a new skill or be open to trying something new so that this can possibly happen?" Because nothing new develops until you're willing to try something out of the box. And finally, you also need to know again about what the limitations of your care provider are, what they're really dealing with, the overall culture that they're dealing with in their hospital or with their colleagues, what the insurance is going to try to do, all of the things. Like maybe there's a form that you need to sign to make it a lot easier for your care provider to follow your lead. But whatever that is, you need to recognize they've got limitations, they've got fears, they've got concerns. Like this is not just about your birth, this is about their career and their livelihood. You need to recognize they're human. And I mean, look at it this way. If you're a customer coming into a store and you want somebody to do something that's against company policy, you're more likely to get what you want if you understand the limitations of that person. So oftentimes, even when I was in retail, we had some really stupid policies. And I knew they were stupid. I knew that they were screwing over the customers. And at the same time, I couldn't directly say that. But what I could do is that if somebody was really open to me guiding them and they weren't rude to me and they weren't trying to go over my head and they weren't trying to be nasty to me and make it seem like it was my fault that this policy existed, I was more likely to show them the loophole so that they could get what they wanted. And I mean, that's it. When you become a birth consumer, you suddenly recognize that you have a lot more power because the entire medical system, again, if you look at it as a business, then you need to come at it like a consumer. You need to recognize the consumer mindset. You need to be like, okay, I'm shopping for a care provider. Is this even the store that I want to go to? Is this even the type of person that I want to deal with? Do they even have what I'm looking for? Because if they don't, they're not the right fit. So, again, if you want to know more, I do talk about this inside my book, Your Empowered Birth, which is available on Amazon. You can also just go into the playlist on my YouTube channel. It's the Empowered Birth Book playlist. You can also check out some of my other videos on care providers. You can go to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/freebies, and get the list of the 17 red flags that you want to avoid when choosing a care provider. And if you really want a deep dive, then you can also go and get your Empowered Birth Academy, which is my full program, which will help you to advocate for yourself in the medical system. You'll automatically get everything that you need to know on hiring and firing your care provider. And ultimately, you're going to get your empowered birth. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. If you loved this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Pay it forward. Tell others where to find this. And stay tuned because the next topic that we're going to go into in the Empowered Birth series is number 2 on our list, which is that not all midwives are created equal. So there is a part 2. I will tell you about the 3 things that you really need to know to avoid hiring a midwife over a midwife. And then we're just going to keep continuing on with this series. So if you love this, again, I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. Or if you don't mind putting it in the comments, I do go through and I read the comments. I do answer them. But the fastest way to get an answer from me is again to email me hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, or you can just sign up for the Empowered Birth Toolkit and hit reply to any of my emails. You just go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/toolkit. Thank you so much for watching. Happy Empowered Birth Journey, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.